Rosanne and Giambalvo, and they're going to be talking about the Colorado model. The presentation's now at hand, and we'll take questions during the talk.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Let's see, the end of this month we'll be having our 17th recovery workshop in Colorado, and we really had the desire to let people know exactly what that venue was, so that, first of all, so that former members have a little bit better information before they decided to come or not, and because we feel that the model has developed professionally enough that we really want to be public about it. So the workshops are open to former members only. They are screened before they actually attend, unless we know them. We have people who have attended 3 or 4 workshops year after year, and it's just great to see the movement that they've made during those years. It's a unique method of recovery because it's in a group model, and that it really emphasizes psychoeducation. So,
and I wanted to let you folks know, if you're not aware, the ICSA Today magazine, what we're presenting today is the article, okay? And we're just here to discuss and see if you have questions about it and make sure you understand. So that's why.
You're going to take questions at the end? Is that during?
Well, I'm okay with doing it at any time.
At any time, if you just raise your hand.
Do you charge anything for that screening? Like, is there a screening
No.
fee? Or?
No, it's really over the phone. And, no.
No, it's just a phone interview, or sometimes it's email interview, and then followed up with the phone if there's any other questions that we have. It's actually very much like the trauma recovery and empowerment model, and that are used by others. But the Colorado model is unique in that the facilitators are almost entirely former members themselves and mental health professionals. In Colorado, there are only 2 exceptions to the mental health professional part. Al Mansfield does have a degree in counseling, but he's not a licensed therapist. And myself, I'm just kind of the organizer and
the glue.
Okay,
she's the glue.
And I do the overview, but then I don't take that much of a huge role in it.
I've heard you do that. Oh,
I got that.
okay.
It's not cooperative.
There.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. The very early models for this particular model was done in conjunction with the AFF annual meetings. Now, for those of you who don't know, AFF stands for American Family Foundation, and it is the old name that ICSA had when it was first formed. But the first recovery workshops that were held in conjunction with those annual meetings at a retreat facility in Stony Point, New York. And it had 2 tracks. It had a track for exit counseling, so that the exit counselors devoted their time to giving information to those people who were newly out or who didn't have an intervention to help them get out. And then the other track was for the recovery issues. And they were led mostly, mostly by mental health professionals who were attending the annual meeting and were associated with AFF.
I see my son's computer and I'm still. I thought I had an easier way to
I think if you hit the over So over the next.
You know,
There.
that's what I'm looking. Okay, wait a minute. This one? Do I hit escape? Hit this one, that's what I was trying. It didn't work. See, this one? Okay, there. Thank you. Thank you.
You jump ahead.
Basically, and now I jumped ahead of you.
Yeah, that's all right.
No, I can go back.
Again, the mini exit counseling part of it.
Did I go off?
No, just keep it there. That's the next one.
Okay.
In the mini exit counseling, the exit counselors presented information that they usually presented during an intervention. So it's basically how thought reform works and Dr. Robert J. Lifton's model. And then the recovery track had to do with issues of identity, finding who you are, establishing who you are after the call, and very many recovery issues such as triggers and trauma and boundaries and all of those things that we covered in the conference. Okay, and then the next one.
Am I way ahead? I'm just kidding. Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
When I became the director of the recovery programs for ICSA, I began to develop this model. We went to Colorado because there was a support group in Colorado for former members, and we had quite a few people in that area that were in the field of helping former members, and some of them were therapists. So actually what the framework was Dr. Robert J. Lifton's criteria and Dr. Margaret Singer's emphasis on psychoeducation and her emphasis on helping ex-members deal with triggers and with the after effects of certain calls. And again, this is designed for 2.5 days. It's not like the great programs in Wellspring and Meadowhaven. It's just a little bit more intense, and it's obviously not a 2-week or a year program. Those programs are far more attentive to the needs of former members than we can be, but we do have ongoing contact with people afterwards for support. So. It's similar to the conference sessions for former members that we have at every conference. This begins the healthy healing process because you finally are in a place where people understand what you're saying because they've been there and done that and can relate to you. It is very, very difficult for former members, most former members, when they get out of a group and they start making friends, or they're maybe even doing some speaking with members of a church or something. It's very hard for them to explain what they've been through. It's like people are kind of shocked, and they, So, I mean, people have even had, when they told people their stories, that's kind of the end of the friendship that was beginning. And so here we are in an atmosphere where there's a room full of people who really understand where you can talk, where you can really express some of the questions you have and some of the concerns you have about what you're going through at the moment.
Now we've caught up.
Okay. So we held the first Colorado workshop in 1994. Again, we learned that there was a lot less need for the exit counseling track because, number one, people were finding a lot of information on the internet, and number two, exit counseling interventions started to slow down, and there weren't that many of them. So we were dealing with people who walked away from a group and were needing the information they wanted a little bit more of an extra job. And the good thing about it is also that the mental health professionals who were facilitating the workshop, they were like the model that they've already done their own recovery work, and they're not talking down to anyone. They're not here to teach them. They're here to explore how we can work together, and that has been one of the most joyous parts of this whole workshop experience.
I want to see where we go. Okay. Is this correct? See, I'm confused. I'm sorry. I'm clicking and we're going ahead more than one slide. Did we miss a slide? Well, that's what I'm saying. Did we miss a slide?
No, you're actually behind me one now.
Oh, okay, okay. I'm behind you one. Okay.
See, if I was reading from the words, you would know where I was, but I'm not living it. The process of induced change topics. I took what Dr. Paul Martin developed as his model of the overview of recovery, which was brilliant, using Lifton's criteria, and I just altered it a little bit, adding some of Sanders and a little bit of Cialdini's. So, I hope Paul, wherever he is, and I think I know where he is okay with my changes, but it definitely is Dr. Paul Martin's model. And what the overview walks you through some of the issues of what you experience in the group as far as recruitment and your life inside the call. And it actually helps them to identify, how do they change your view of reality? How do they mold your behavior and your personality into one more useful to the group? How do they discredit other sources of information and feedback and make you more dependent upon the group? They actually built up boundaries between, unhealthy boundaries between you and the outside world, and most often, you and your family. How do they break down healthy boundaries between you and the rest of the group? Because in a group, you have to be totally open, even to what you're thinking, what you're feeling, everything has to be out there on the table. And why? Because they need to have that information so they know how to handle you.
Right.
How do they disable your ability to question and think critically? You will often hear former members explain that they had doubts. They had thoughts of that something's wrong here. They had doubts about the ideology of the group or the sacred science of the group, and they had to put that on the shelf because it was taboo to ask questions, especially after the first recruitment part. For a little while, when you first get into the group, you can have a little more room to ask questions, but after a while, you ask a question. What's wrong with you for asking a question? So,
You're supposed to know this already.
yes. And we do stress that there is no cookie-cutter approach to recovery. Not everybody needs therapy. It can be helpful, but that this is doable without therapy, as long as you don't have severe trauma or have problems that really need the help of a therapist. And every person's experience in the group is similar but different. And it really, once recovery and the length it takes has to do with a lot of different factors, like how long you were in the group, what kind of group it was, what parts of the thought reform program did they stress the most, and how traumatized were you, and how isolated were you. So there's a lot of factors that will determine, how you do your recovery and how long it'll take. Over the years, we began to that, they needed something different. And one of the good parts about this workshop is we're so open to criticism, critique, positive, questioning. And what we did is we just listened very carefully to what they said. We took it to ICSA. We were able, at the same time, there was a person who was wanting to give a grant to develop something more helpful for former members, and so the grant went towards developing a track, or not a track, an entire recovery workshop for second generation only. And what we did is, at the same time, was we made a special track in the Colorado model for second generation SGAs. And so they meet on their own first period of time, especially during the overview process, because they didn't really, have those kind of pressures put on them to join, because they had no choice about being there. They were born into it or brought in at a young age when their parents joined. The team of facilitators interacts with participants with respect and offers safety, which is crucial, and the former members required to do this work. They also serve as a role model. And but the thing is that the respect is key. It's we've been there. We know what you're going through, and we. There's nothing wrong with former members. There's something wrong with the system they were in, but it's not them. And they're having difficulties now because of that symptom. Not that there's anything wrong with them. They're going through perfectly normal things as a result of a very abnormal and difficult circumstance. And that needs to be loud and clear in our workshops. Oh, wait a minute. I forgot that last one. And that last one, for me, is one that is just incredible. This team of facilitators have given their time and their dedication to develop this program on a volunteer basis with no payback at all, except payback to see the changes and the progress of the people who attend workshops. It's very moving.
That includes Carol. No, we're not at published agenda yet.
Oh dear.
You have to get to your part before I'm going to release you.
Of course, a lot of you were in the former member workshop that we did on Thursday, and I hope that you noticed that we were trying very hard to create a safe environment so that you felt able to share what you need to share, ask what you need to ask, and to not feel as though you're being watched. And and that's really important. So that safe environment is crucial. And this is accomplished with the commitment of confidentiality. We ask people what you hear here stays here. The caveat is that we can't be 100% sure that they're all former members. We've screened them, we've done our best to make sure, but we're not 100% sure. So if there's something you don't want to get into in friendly hands, you can at least talk to one of the facilitators about it. But just hesitate, go in your guts when it could be used against you. And this is accomplished with the commitment of confidentiality from the participants and the active, engaged leadership of the facilitators to stay focused on the defined task and protects its members if needed.
Carol's the bouncer, bottom line. Basically, we all cover each other's backs. That's what this is about. And the facilitators, when I'm facilitating, then I have somebody else writing and attending to the group or whatever. It's really a very cohesive team. And it's focused on the safety of the participants, but also on the coherence of the workshop, and that it flows the way it needs to, because we're very responsive to the needs of the participants. And so, but Carol was bouncing my workshop yesterday. I couldn't finish it without her. And that's what happens. So you've got to have at least one other person at your back to take care of these things that we just know happen. They just happen. Okay.
Okay, this published agenda is on the internet. The welcome and introductions, and then we do the overview of the recovery process. The SGAs go into their own room for the overview part. Then we do critical thinking, and the flow of the different sessions is actually, we rearrange things because we found that it would flow better in other ways. We used to do critical thinking, kind of third or fourth, and now it's right up there on the top because, we're encouraging people to question what we're saying and to challenge it if they feel as though that needs to be done, and to think critically. It's really important. And then we do a session on post-traumatic stress syndrome and triggers. And then dealing with anger and grief. And anger very much is a part of the grief process as well. But one of the healthy signs that we see when a person's starting to progress in their recovery is that they're getting angry. And that's okay. Then we do a whole session on reinventing yourself after the call to who am I. We do boundaries, recognition and repair, and some of you sat through Rosanne's boundary session yesterday that she has developed really well. We also do relationships and intimacy, and then we have the last session is open feedback. What did you get out of this weekend? What do you have to say that you don't want to go home without saying? And we really use that feedback session to put improvements in on the workshop. It's important to have that session.
I just wanted to add one thing. We learned, this has developed over 16 years, the sequence and the topics and everything. So that's why we're at a place that we feel like this is a model that can work in more than one place now. But anger and grief, we used to separate the workshops, and people were so exhausted, and actually putting them together in that order is critical. And we take a 2-hour break after the anger and grief workshop because people are so exhausted, and we take a nap, take a hike, take a drink, whatever it is that you need to do to take care of yourself. And then we come back and finish it. And our schedule is somewhat like a marathon, like these conferences, in that it's 48 hours. It's a 48-hour marathon from Friday at 4 until Sunday at 4. But it's the most power-packed approach. And it's really, I tell people, it changes your trajectory of healing from my perspective if you can get this type of intense work with a group of fellow cult survivors. We've just had such good results and such good reports of how it's helped people that that's my comment about it.
Okay. Actually, when a person is thinking about coming to a workshop, it's a little bit scary for them to attend their first workshop because their sense of trust has been violated by a group, and here they are, coming to a group, ICSA sponsored weekend, and the red flags start waving. So we make sure that we have both myself and other people on the facilitator team for them to talk to and ask questions to before they make their decision or after they register. We sometimes have a person the day before they're supposed to be at the workshop call and say, I'm scared. And yeah, I would be too. And so we realize that, and that's why we have to make this such a safe place for them.
The Martellas came for 5 years before they started presenting. And I'll never forget, in the beginning, I used to take it personal because Michael would leave workshops, you know. You don't ask permission. He would come to a workshop, then he'd be gone for 4 hours. And then he'd come to a workshop, and then he'd go up to his room and scream and yell and complain, and then he'd come back. And they did this for 5 years. And now they're facilitators, so that tells you something. I mean, that was just their process. And they were second-generation adults, and they were just pissed because we didn't have this set up for children raised in cults. And so basically it was, okay, help us develop the curriculum, and let's go for it, and that's what's happened. But they hung in there all those years. Not many people can, but again, it's a pretty free-flowing weekend, and if people can attend 2 sessions, that's acceptable. If they can make it through the whole thing, that's great, whatever. That's our attitude, is you get to do this on your own terms in your own time. Okay, now's my turn here. Okay, the bond's been handled. Okay, so we begin with, like Carol does for the ex-member track here, we begin with introductions, because as you know, with ex-members, everybody needs to know who everybody else is. And we want to also make sure that their stories make sense. And we want to try to weed out if there are, plans. And we do the best we can, but we're not, we don't have the resources of the FBI, right? So, anyway, so we do that, and that takes, Carol does that. That's a 2-hour shot right there, sometimes a 3-hour shot. It depends on the group. And then then Carol, this is what Carol's presented. I'm just putting it in a summary, but then we talk about the context of cold trauma. And that's what Carol's basically, the exit counseling. The first evening is basically the summation of the exit counseling track, right? So your overview.
It's the overview, to walk through the cold
right.
experience.
So that's setting the context of describing cults and recruitment and indoctrination. And basically we present in an informal lecture, like my workshop yesterday. We'll have handouts, we'll set the context of the topic, and we'll have professional references, and this is what's going on in the field as it relates to boundaries or trauma or critical thinking or relationships, and then the conversation begins. And the conversation is the most important part. But the context is important. And so we adapt our context every year. What we present, we try to update with what's happening in each of those areas of our field. Again, it's all about stimulating conversation to process what ex-members need to process as it relates to PTSD symptoms or trauma or identity issues or whatever. So this is the first one that Hal Mansfield typically presents on critical thinking, and this is just a synopsis of what they do. They help survivors understand how the ability to critically think was undermined in the group. And he actually, Hal's got a very dry wit, and he does this whole thing with humor. That's so amazing. It's like Bill Goldberg does it in another way. These comedians who do critical thinking are phenomenal. And that's kind of what Hal's kind of a low-key kind of ex-Air Force guy who just tells you, how he does it. And it's charming, and it's disarming, and it's understandable. He works with the cognitive distortion stuff from Captain Parts. And, it's things that we all know, but it's helpful to put the context on and help people think about things and understand things better, and help be patient with yourself about why you couldn't critically think when you were in the middle of the soup, as I say. And that was part of the reason why we're stuck in our cults. And until we could get to the ability to critically think, could we begin to do something about it. The PTSD section I've been typically doing, we work with the trigger piece, we work with PTSD. I actually take the cluster of symptoms and we work defining them, but then also what do you do about this in your everyday life? How do you work with arousal symptoms and re-experiencing symptoms? And we like to process as a group. We typically have tablets like this, and we are writing down all the time what works for, if people are willing to talk about what's working for them, what's not working for them. Of course, questions as they come up. But it's all about, as you know, with PTSD, gaining control of your bodies and staying in the present, and then slowly, when it's safe, processing the trauma. grief is next. This is Nancy's baby. And there's kind of a dialectic between anger and grief, we've discovered. At least that's my conceptualization of it, where you kind of deal with the anger of what happened, and then you grieve it. And then you deal with the anger of another piece of it, and then you grieve it. And it's a very important process. And we let the group kind of go. She'll start with anger, and then it kind of evolves into grief. Most people are would rather stay with the anger and not deal with the grief, actually. But it depends on the group. Every group is different. Some people have done a lot of their anger work, so they're ready to jump into the grief. And then some people haven't done any of their anger work, and they need to stay there. But again, it's a responsive group process. There's the 2-hour break I was suggesting. Then after the break, we get a little more cognitive again, and we talk about identity. We talk about psychosocial development. We talk about brainstorming and problem solving. And again, it's kind of setting the stage for ex-members to talk. And it's their wisdom. It's their wisdom. It's them sharing their journey about, what was wrong about what happened there. And it's their wisdom of how they're managing life here and what's useful. And it's a very dynamic, creative process. Then most of you probably were in the boundaries thing or know enough about it, but the boundaries thing is always a big one. And we're always, I have lists from years of responses from that workshop. And it's been just one of those basic ones. And you have to lay the context of the boundaries workshop down before you're ready to talk about relationships and intimacy. And that's the other piece of this model is one flows into the other. From critical thinking to trauma, to anger and grief, to identity issues, to boundaries, to relationships. There's an actual logical flow that works with that we've learned. And then the workshops interface very well. And it's just like Carol and I passed the baton to Nancy, and then Nancy goes with relationships and intimacy. And it's pretty even. When you do this enough with people, you kind of get this down. It works very well. And that's how the boundaries is. I'm the precursor to relationships and intimacy. And we talk about the impact of the cult's interference on significant relationships. She presents models of helping. She does this target thing with levels of intimacy. Then she takes the boundary piece and adds it to the target to show how that works. And she's a teacher by training, and she's excellent, and she's done this for 15 years. We let her off 1 year to get married. But other than that, she's been there. And anyway, so then she does the relationship piece. There's also, for some cult survivors who suffered with sexual abuse and may be triggered, we're already prepared for that possibility. And Leona steps forward, another one of our facilitators, and she takes on that as a special group when that need arises. And we make this announcement ahead of time. If this becomes triggering, or if you think you want to talk with someone but not the group about this topic, then a facilitator is available to discuss those things as they come up in boundaries and/or relationships. So that's, again, how the facilitators cover each other's back and make sure the participants are taken care of. Okay, this part you guys are really going to laugh about. We have a game night at the conference, okay? And not many of you were probably in the music therapy workshop, but after I went to this workshop, I said, this is what we do here. We play. And people are terrified when they find out that we have a game night, okay? And Carol's very disarming. She goes, now you don't have to come to game night. It's Rosanne's games, but you don't have to come, right? And I just stumbled upon this because my family plays games. And I just played games one year in the beginning. And then 1 year, we lost the facility we had, and I didn't bring games. And there was a lot of drama going on with Ken, and we were folding envelopes and sending out mailings. I don't know what we were doing on game night. And that 1 year, it was not successful, as successful the next day because we didn't have game night. We noticed the difference. When you have game night and when people choose to freely play, and believe me, it's an amazing experience to have game night with ex-members. There's a bunch of flaming party animals. I'm serious. I'm shocked what I see. But anyway, we just put it out there. People do what they want to do or what they don't want to do. but the cohesion in the group improves dramatically from my perspective after game night. And so it's just part of the protocol. And we just put it in the agenda, game night, if you want to come, come. Bring your own beer, you know, bring whatever. And if you don't do beer, that's cool too. It's whatever you're comfortable with. And so it's just become an important part. And again, the facilitators are there with, it's a more egalitarian relationship with facilitators and participants. And in some sense, it might be a little bit more like addiction treatment in the sense that we're survivors who have been there. And we're also, I would say, we do disclose our occult trauma when it's appropriate, just like in therapy. When our occult trauma is appropriate, we will share it in the context of the group. But in general, the group is for the ex-member. But there's plenty of times when it's appropriate and compelling for a facilitator to share an aspect of their occult experience. And so that, again, is handled maybe a little more like an addiction treatment model. The weekends wrap up with an open discussion of loose ends, and Carol's really good. I mean, we have like 2 meetings just to wrap up and make sure that people are okay to leave. And it's very hard for people to leave after being together like this because there's an intensity to it, like a cult, unfortunately. But this is a little more real, how this works. And so there are people who, you know, they find it hard to leave. And we're investigating that there's family, friends, or therapists to go back to help from the place that they're at now. And so they do a workshop evaluation. We take it seriously, and then we have a facilitator meeting. And then we adapt the changes in the next year's workshop. So this is a summary of techniques and modalities that we use. And psychoeducation, of course, is critical. Cognitive restructuring happens in the process of all the workshops, but especially in critical thinking. Contained exposure, I would say, very carefully happens in the PTSD workshop and also as people are sharing their story. And I hope you understand we never pressure people to share their stories, and we would even caution people to take it very slow and not share if they have any hesitation to not go there. And there's enough facilitators that it's very easy for someone to go off with one of them and just unload what they need to. The skills training, anything from the boundaries work we do to relationship issues. I mean, it's kind of hands-on, stay in the present, let's deal with where you are now. One thing we've learned from second-generation adults, that's what they want. And so the point of this model is to foster safety, stabilization, and empowerment. Those are critical goals of our workshops. And so with Singer's invaluable insights, Lifton's brilliant framework, and ICSA's ongoing commitment to cult recovery, the Colorado models evolved. And it's a hybrid. I had a heck of a time finding any kind of articles of anybody doing anything like this out there. And, you know, there are some people, some trauma groups, but they don't do it in 48 hours like we do. We do in 48 hours what they do in 13 weeks or 30 weeks. And I'm like, yeah, we're cult survivors. We know how to do this, right? Yeah. Especially SGAs, it's like, whoa, okay. And we deal with this, you can see a small group size. And we know, we had one workshop with 25 and we were all busy. And we just said, we can't do more than this because people aren't being served. So it's a small group, there's a lot of personal tension, there's a lot of interesting group dynamics, and there's a lot of years of understanding how this works to help people dip into it quickly. The model works because there's a lot of listening to stories. There's a lot of, it might be triggered to say witnessing, but it's listening to other stories, reflecting on the commonality of the experience. As you know, group work reduces social isolation, creates an opportunity for contacts with others, and offers help in facing ongoing symptoms, stressors, and problems. I mean, you know, the last thing people want to do coming out of the cult is join a group, right? Is join another group. So group therapy is the most terrifying, I think, for groups. And this is not therapy, it's group work. It's group psychoeducation and support. But it's still terrifying because it's a group. But the irony is, that's also the most healing modality for this, after being in a group. And that's what I think is part of the magic of this. I hate using that word. Okay, just part of what works about this. The cognitive and educational focus are critical, and it helps people, again, understand from a larger context their cultural trauma. And this is the piece that, a lot of typical psychotherapists don't get. Participants are given a comprehensive psychosocial framework. That's what each of these pieces that we pull out and examine, that's the comprehensive framework. Starting with the overview that Carol does to then each of the aspects of cult recovery. These aspects came from this woman. She developed this. She and Margaret Singer. She was inspired by Margaret Singer. And then Carol said, this is what we need to do, and then we did it. We've been tweaking it, but this is her model. Okay. This is why I think it works. The cognitive focus allows former members to stay more grounded, to process their experience. And, that's what we're learning in trauma work as well. And, the cognitive piece is critical, but there's other pieces. Focusing on the participant's strength and how to build skills is more motivating and empowering, while it helps them manage their anxiety. So again, this is about staying in the present and staying in your head as much as you can during the workshop. And then you get into anger and grief, and guess where you go? Hopefully you're in a place that you can then go into your feelings. But it's carefully, let's start cognitive, let's move into more of the emotional piece, then let's take a break. Then we come back and do a little more cognitive work, then we play. Then we come back and we do a little more cognitive, and then the boundary stuff and the relationship stuff, which is tough. And then we do a lot of closure to wrap up with it. And so that's how it works. Structured and carefully sequenced. And as I mentioned earlier, each workshop builds on the previous one. And this is our inspiration, is Judith Herman's work. Because the Colorado model works with her stages of recovery. Again, we do it in 48 hours. What other people do in probably 48 weeks. But that's the concept. The first three aspects, the first three workshops are focused on establishing safety and beginning to understand and create context for the cult experience. And then the next one's anger and grief, and inventing yourself relate more with the remembrance and mourning and the processing of the trauma and the emotional aspects of recovery, I would say. And then boundaries and relationships and interests build you back to reconnection. And so this is part of, this came out of Carol, but she was inspired by Herman and Singer, and this is part of why it works. And the other piece of this is the trained facilitator team, who are former members and mental health professionals. And again, there are exceptions to this, there are people who are not mental health professionals who are excellent facilitators. And as long as they've done their cult recovery work, it can work out. We just happen to have a majority of mental health people. The more I'm in this field, it's truly best to have both credentials. The credential of an ex-member, which I consider the most important one, and the credential of a mental health professional as a just to help you sort out the difference between the two. The cult trauma from mental illness, from whatever. It's helpful to have both. But they're still skilled, knowledgeable people, and when Carol explains the training and mentoring thing, there's always ways for people to do that. I would like to comment about the resiliency and cohesion of the facilitator team. And again, that's a critical part of this, but this has been a 16-year development. So when we start, as we bring in new people, it will still evolve, but this takes time to get it into the place that we've got it with this type of cohesion and this sequence and this order and how it works. It's kind of, we think, in a place that's going to stick this way for a while, but we never know. ICSA ICSA helps to set the stage for cult recovery to occur, but nothing is possible without the will of the individual survivor and the strength of the group. And so my push is around the solidarity of this. Every year, the facilitator team, we encourage the group to establish their identity. I mean, as you can imagine, ex-members can be very vocal and very demanding. And we encourage that. And again, as I mentioned before, the group context is critical for cult survivors if they have this option. This comes from Judith Herman's work, but this is, I think, so true. The solidarity of the group provides the strongest protection against terror and despair, and the strongest antidote to trauma. Trauma isolates and the group recreates that sense of belonging. Trauma shames and stigmatizes and the group bears witness and affirms. Trauma degrades the victim and the group exalts her. Trauma dehumanizes the victim and the group restores her humanity. I mean, that's the power of group work. And anyone who's been in the trauma field and been in the group field would agree with this. And we just see this every year. So we're true believers in that sense. Is it your turn yet? Is it my turn? I do this one? Okay. Okay. You can see things keep changing here.
Keep it fluid.
Yeah, keep us guessing. The Colorado model provides a unique venue for cult recovery in a group context. The small group size, cognitive and educational focus, experienced facilitator team, and encouragement of group solidarity appeals to many cult survivors at different stages of recovery. And I do want to make a comment. I mean, we do have people who have been out of their group for a year, which is unusual these days, and then people that have been out of their group for 20 years. And it blows my mind how this works, but it works. Because they can access, I guess it's like Disneyland, you know, you can access it at different levels. In a certain way, you access it at the level, you like that, Anne, Disneyland concept. Joyce likes that too. You know, Disneyland, you can be in the adults part of Disneyland, or you can enjoy it at whatever level you're at. You can process this at whatever level you're at. I think because we have a small group, we can be adaptive and we can work with different levels. And, you know, the people who need a lot more go off with facilitators, and those that don't work with the group, and then the group polices itself, and then the older, more experienced members help the younger, less experienced members, and we just watch it in action and we just marvel, okay? And that's how it works. It's comprehensive and carefully designed to increase the speed of recovery to those courageous enough to deal with the after effects of cult involvement.
Okay, about the mentorship program, we've discussed it and implemented a program. We're very willing to have people come and, you know, learn how to facilitate in the workshop. But we strongly emphasize that a person is a mental health professional and a former member. It doesn't mean that there aren't mental health professionals who do this work very well who aren't former members. There are those people, and we're willing to consider them. Just, you know, that's more the exception than the rule. We expect that anyone who wants to become a facilitator attend at least one workshop as a participant. And so that one thing is that we can observe that they're well on their way, and that, you know, it's not going to be trying to train a person who isn't quite done all of their recovery work themselves. Actually, we would prefer that they attend one or two first. These are the rules we have for the workshop, and I do mean these are cardinal rules. We will not change them. One is that people who are attending are former members. And of course, that's the one we've had to break a couple times. We had one instance where a fellow attended a workshop as a former member of the Unification Church. And he went back and reported to the Unification Church from which he was sent about what would happen at the workshop, where they said all kinds of evil things were going to be happening. And it was a deprogramming session. And he reported back, and he got in trouble because he didn't tell them what they wanted to hear. And so the following year, he came as a former member. Yes. And then we have a person who was presenting as a former member of a really damaging group. And she attended 4 years, I think so. One workshop in Stony Point and at least 3 in Colorado. And she, we thought that she was rather fragile because a lot of the time she sat in the room and just had her legs up and her arms around her legs and just rocked back and forth. She never shared. Until the last year that she was in, and she asked one question. But anyway, this person turned out to be a paid person by Scientology. And I think you probably
She was an
know the
actress.
story. She was actually an actress, and she was paid by Scientology to infiltrate.
How did you find out?
Pardon?
How did you find out?
Actually, a former member in Scientology got very suspicious and did a private investigation. And I did not, when it came out on the internet, I said, no way. And then I actually met the person whose name she was using, who is actually a former member. She got married, she wasn't using the name anymore. And we put pieces together, and it was true. But again, we do nothing at the workshop that we're worried about going back to a group because it's just, it's not deprogramming, certainly, and we feel that it's good work. And so if we make a mistake and, someone infiltrates that, and she was really a good actress, right, David?
Yeah.
She did Disturbed very well. It's tough, But honestly, we don't think it harmed us that much, but it's unnerving. It's clearly unnerving.
Yeah.
It is what it is. And then the other cardinal rule we have is that there's no audio or videotaping at the workshops. That's just a safety issue. We have had 2 people who came out of the group that didn't really have a whole lot of exit counseling and really were on you can identify that some people get on they just gotta go and expose this group and expose everything, and it's a good energy, it's good for them to do that, but what they wanted to do was come to the workshop as participants and film it all. And I said no 3 times before they showed up, and then, and so one withdrew, the other person came and brought the cameras, and I said, absolutely no. So, they're very upset with us, but what matters is the safety and the ability for the ex-members to, have a place to talk and relate to one another, and that's just not okay. So, anyway, those are our cardinal rules. Other than that, we work with people and try to adapt to their needs and their desires as much as possible. And the other part that I wanted to mention was that, we want so much for mental health professionals to understand the recovery process and be able to work with former members. But we just can't allow former members or ex-members,
Mental health
professionals into the workshop unless they're a former member, because we've asked this question. In fact, we're trying to get it to be okay for them to attend so they could observe. But the response of the participants was that they would feel like they were, that's not okay. So we also have that rule that mental health professionals need to be ex-members in order to attend.
You could join a cult for a year then.
Nobody joins it.
We're not good. Any questions?
Yes, I wonder, do you do like follow-up after a month or a year to find out, you know, how they progress?
We actually don't do that. We do, what we do, of course, when you sign up for the workshop, your name, contact information is confidential. You don't give that to anyone else. But the last day of the workshop, we pass around a pad, and I say, look, if you want, we want you to stay in touch with one another. If you want to do that, put your name and your email address on it, and I'll mail that out. And please, if you don't want to, don't put your name down. So there's some safety in that. And so people do keep in touch, and they also know that they can call the facilitators at any time if they want.
I was
no.
kind of thinking, you know, that I didn't get any kind of counseling or anything, but I kind of, when I left, I just, actually I did a degree in psychology of religion, and that was my therapy doing that. But I just wondered how it compares, you know, like if going through this actually leads to a quicker recovery than just muddling along and actually finding your feet again. And I was wondering if you've done any kind of follow-up on that.
Not in that sense. I will tell you, we have repeaters.
Yes.
And it's like alumni. We have a small group of alumni. We have some of them here. For us, it's a delight. And we can reflect back the changes from one year to the next.
Yeah.
And that's marvelous. And
But that's on a small number. There's no kind of
it's a small number. It's a small number. And I want to add one thing. We are looking at the possibility of doing, at some point, working with the research people on a before weekend, after weekend, like a pre-test, post-test.
You need to kind of maybe a year later as well.
Maybe. Maybe. But we're just exploring the possibility of measuring if people are willing to go through this, and it wouldn't be a requirement of doing the workshop, but if they're willing to go through an hour of tests before the workshop begins, and then an hour of tests after the workshop ends, and then, for instance, whatever, 6 months, a year, whatever, but we don't have an ongoing thing to keep this going. We are just thrilled when people come back, and about a third of the group is usually repeaters. Yeah.
Couple of questions. How much does it cost?
It varies according to the facility. We only charge like maybe $15 above what it costs for our meals and the rooms, so that, you know.
Ballpark.
It's
150 to 300?
No, well, it depends on when they register. It can be as low as $175 if they register early.
That's for the whole weekend, the whole 48
Yeah,
hours?
Yes.
the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, we keep the fees as low as we can. And unfortunately, we have so many people who need scholarship. This
Right.
year so far, we've got 7 people registered. And believe me, people register last minute. So this poor
Oh, yeah.
conference center, when I make these last minute changes, they go crazy. But of those 7 people, only 2 have been able to pay their own way.
Right, yeah, most former members,
Yeah,
2 times
right.
thrown together.
Yeah.
The second thing is, over the years, our experience has been that the pathology, the depth of trauma of a lot of members has deepened as they have come out. Do you have a filtering process, or do you ever turn away, obviously you're going to try and turn away plants, but do you get some individuals where they're just so damaged that they just couldn't make it through 48 hours?
Yes, and
Yes.
we have filtered them out.
What do you do in that context?
Pardon me?
What do you do in that context?
Well, what I'll do is I'll speak to them. I'll say that, given that the information and the interaction of the dynamics of the workshop may not be useful or helpful to you at this as gentle as possible.
Yeah, a severe addiction would be an issue, obviously, and severe dissociation. And having said that, I'll tell you what, we've had one mistake, which is, I mean, we've had several mistakes, but one big one in the screening process. But again, you know, we did our best in what information they gave us, right?
Yeah,
Over the phone.
happens to us.
And so, but you'll be amazed, we have had people in this workshop and the Connecticut workshop, which is strictly just second generation adults, who have had a diagnosis of dissociative identity disorder. And again, it depends where they are on that continuum. I've been marveled that they've made it through a weekend and gotten benefit from it and didn't freak out. And, you know, we weren't worried about them killing themselves and the things that happen with that population. Having said that, I'm not searching out those people, trust me. But if those people have good support and are in therapy and are working part-time and have some resources, it's possible that they could weather this. But we do our best, and we're trying to standardize what we do on that end so that, you know, we get people who can really use the workshop. And then also those people then interfere with the other people's process, as you know.
Right.
And then, you know, we have enough facilitators to deal with that. But usually we've had good luck with it, and if we keep it cognitive enough and skill building enough and empowerment based enough and educational focused enough that if they can go there, there's stuff for them. And then, you know, there are the moments when they can't handle it anymore.
How many workshops a year do you have? One?
We do Colorado every July, we do Connecticut every
All right, so
April.
those are the two you're talking about. Okay.
Yes.
How do you find your clients?
They find us.
They find us through ICSA, I mean, you know, I send my clients to this, you know, I'm in Colorado, all the Colorado therapists, Lauren, just like Lorna sends her clients, I mean, anyone in the area that is aware of it, I put things out on the listserv, please encourage your clients to come, you know, we don't have, you know, it's basic what we do, but we're also not equipped to handle 100 people.
So is it mainly, like in the Colorado one, is it mainly people who live in that area?
In that area usually,
Yeah.
but some
Okay.
people fly in from California or from other
We've
places.
had people from other countries.
And we have had that. We never know. It's such a, you know, random thing, you know. It was on the Jehovah's Witness website before we did Connecticut one year, and so we had 6 Jehovah's Witnesses. And you know, and then there was the Alamo stuff, and then there was money, and then their Alamo group, you know, and money lines up, you know, quickly, and ex-members line up quickly, and so we never know. And so we just learned you have to be spontaneous and adaptive, and not get crazy. And when we have deadlines, if we have to meet them, we have to meet them. But if we can add extra people, we will, if we feel that we can handle it, you know, with the facilitator load. Joyce wants to say something.
I just want to say something about having experienced this Colorado model both as a participant for 5 years and then actually moving into being a facilitator, that it's a living and breathing and changing thing. So it's not stuck. There may be parameters and some things that actually are in place and work, but for each group, those things shift. So it will be informed by the group of people who show up. And so they don't get stuck in, well, we're going to teach this, this, and this, and that's the way it's going to be. It's like they have an idea what they're going to present and the issues that they're going to talk about. Sometimes they don't get through the whole presentation because that's not what's needed. So that's why it's so important to actually go and experience it as a member yourself first, so you can understand how that flows back and forth. To know that it's not stuck, it's not something you can teach. You can't say, okay, here's the curriculum, and this is what you're going to teach, and this is the lecture. That's not what it's about. So you don't get that. You do get the piece of information, but you actually have to get the understanding that it's got to flow. And it's got to be able to respond to the people there. And as a second generation adult, when I first started coming, the information, a lot of it didn't apply to me. And it was very frustrating. And I started talking about that, and they responded. Okay, there's a piece we don't understand. There's a piece we don't know about. All right, we're going to have to start doing some reading. We're going to have to start talking to people. We're going to have to start figuring out that you can just kind of pop in and all of a sudden be a facilitator. Anyways, that's my experience.
Thank you. Anyone else?
This gentleman.
Is there, does the, which we call conference, workshop, do the workshops function differently depending on the backgrounds that ex-members come from? For example, if it's very heavily Bible-based participants versus extreme-based versus some other orientation?
No. No, I mean, when we're on the ground running in the group, it will manifest itself and will respond. You know, if someone's dissociating more because they were in an Eastern group, then we would respond to that. If someone's more angry because they were in a Bible-based group, whatever, you know, it honestly doesn't matter for us. I mean, it depends on what the majority of the people.
Not for you, but I mean, does it change the
No,
dynamic?
it'll change the group, but every group is different. Every group is different. For 16 years, every group is different. So we just know that, and we just kind of let it flow, and we respond. And honestly, you know, we've done this enough, we can do this in our sleep. You know, I'm telling us how we feel about it. It's like, and I don't, you know, want to minimize what it is we do, because we're very attentive and responsive, but it really doesn't matter about what group or any of that. It really doesn't. That's not been our experience, I would say.
You had a question?
I'm just like, wow. I mean, if I didn't have plans, I'd be there.
Oh, we would love to have you.
But this is my question. You know, I mean, if I go, I willingly want to be there. But I'm thinking now, like my oldest son, I just reestablished contact with. And, you know, I'm kind of thinking, well, let's just say I threw this up there, sent him some information. And he was reluctant. I mean, not like I'm forcing him, but he decided to go. But he's not wholeheartedly like some of us are like, oh, I just want so to be healed. But he comes with this sort of, you know, so my question is, when there's somebody like that in that group, like, has that happened before?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Not that they're being, you know, kidnapped, hit over the head, and thrown into your group, but there might be some inner conflict. Kind of thinking, what does that look like?
Well, we're fairly quick at picking up on that, and because sometimes those people are kind of resistant to the information they're hearing, and we just present the information, and you know, if they say, well, I disagree with that, well, that's fine. You know,
Would you actually screen someone like that out though, Carolyn? No, you wouldn't screen some. You wouldn't like. You don't want someone who's totally willing.
Oh, no. Ambivalence is good.
Okay.
Ambivalence is okay. And oh man, the group's going to take care of this. We don't need to do anything.
Right.
Really. The group is going to take care of it. And if we can be patient and just let it evolve, there'll be another ex-member who'll say, get out of denial. You were in a goddamn cult. And we're like, go girl. It's like, it's so much better if they say it than if we say it. And so we just learn to not go there and let it be what it is. Right. They have to be respectful and they have to keep a confidentiality, but they don't have to like it. They just, you know, and kids in particular, teenagers. And fortunately, we have the adaptability of 2 tracks so that parents and children aren't in the same track. Sometimes we have that ability, which really helps.
And what's the youngest you've taken in so far?
The youngest we've taken teenagers, early 20s.
16.
Yeah. 16.
16.
Okay, there we go. Joyce knows.
Okay.
She came from a different country. She was 16.
Oh, yes,
They were. Him and his mother.
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh,
she didn't sit in it, but
she brought her son.
Right. Yeah. But I was going to say, the other thing is, there's the first part of the session starts with saying it's important to take care of yourself. And so if you need to leave and go sleep or go take a walk and miss part of it, there's no stigma to that. Everybody comes, you know, if they need to go, then everybody knows, oh, they must have needed to go. And so there's no question that, where were you? Or, now, sometimes people will worry if they haven't seen someone for a while, but it's only, you know, oh, well, I know, you know, that person's sleeping, or they said they were going to go take a walk. You know, so that's the only thing that happens. But the fact of the matter is, when my husband and I first went, he actually spent a lot of time sleeping. He would come in, dip in, get a little, go to sleep.
I told him
Come
that,
in,
Joyce.
dip-
You're backing me up. That's what facilitators do.
And I tell you what, I mean, I kept going in there. I wish I had had the ability to just go sleep. But I couldn't. I needed to get every piece of information I could possibly get. So we had a different response, but it wasn't, we both got a lot out of it, even though we had a very different way of processing that first, group.
This gentleman?
Has it ever been, and could it be problematic to have several members of the same group come at the same time?
Oh, we've had that, yeah. In fact, I mean, we could even do one of these for a group of people who left the same group. But I mean, that's possible if they, wanted to have it. But, yeah, we've had people 4 or 5 from the same group, and it's...
So there's no fear of informing?
See, it's not like an exit counseling. I know in an exit counseling, you want to be extra careful of that. But on recovery work, they're there because they want to be there, and they help each other in recovery. It's like your family left together. It's kind of like that. We love it. If there's a couple JWs, oh my God, they have a new family. Oh my God, you remember this? And they compare notes, and they find even more treacherous things that happen back there. And it's wonderful when we can get from more than one from a group. But whatever we get can become a cohesive group if they choose it. And, in general, people love this, and they find friends, and we just encourage them to stay connected. Okay, Dave.
Yeah, have you had any outside professional groups look at this model and just give you any kind of feedback about it?
No, we haven't.
No.
We haven't. But now that we publish, perhaps we will.
We've had some criticism, but...
We've had some criticism, but...
Knowledgeable criticism, or just they really don't know?
Not useful criticism for
Yeah.
professionals.
Yeah. Well, again, uninformed and yeah.
Yeah, Ron?
Ron?
Would you be open ever to sort of bringing your program to another context where another organization had already gathered a group of ex-members and said, would you come and do a workshop at our facility here in whatever? Have you ever thought about, now that would mean, of course, that there would be observers, there would be some of the differences, but it would be the other people's, dime that they'd be doing it, and they had already made it okay with their clients. And, so that more people, professionals, could see the model, and could see how it works operationally.
We'd have to evaluate that on a case-by-case basis. I mean, we just had this one group of facilitators. When the polygamy raids were happening, we were thinking, oh God, they could just get a group of those kids, or I wanted to do the mothers. It's like I wanted the mothers. And if we could get the government involved and get them away long enough, we put something together like this. And I mean, there's a lot of possibilities. There's just a small group of us at this point, but we could clearly do more than we're doing. Maybe one more a year, perhaps. I don't know. But, I love the concept of a group of people leaving Jehovah's Witnesses and then coming in and just working with that group, But, that takes some doing, and funding is a problem. And, we do it free for ICSA, but I don't think we're willing to do it free for other people.
Well, Wellspring did that a couple of times in Sweden, and it was very helpful for healthcare professionals in Sweden to actually see it work.
Yeah.
And then they were able to do it.
I know. See, we did an adaptation of this in Australia.
The nice thing about that is they paid for it.
Yes, I know.
So
I mean, Nancy Mickelon and I did an ex-member track for a conference in Australia, and we basically, but we did it the way Carol did. We said only ex-members. And we had 60 people show up, and we had to use microphones. But we held our boundaries around the ex-member piece. And I still think it was successful, but it was closer to a conference than a recovery workshop. But, and we'll take it from, then I presented this model to the mental health people there, and they were like, we're ready to go. And I'm like, okay, how many people are ex-members who are mental health people here? And like, 2 people out of 30 raised their hands, and I said, the best I can do is take their lead, get involved with ex-members and learn this territory, and then hopefully we can come back and do a training for mental health people. there's a lot of ways to adapt this. But I guess in a certain sense, we're just beginning, but it's at a place that I think it can be replicated or at least used to inform other models. And
just a comment on this last comment. I'm sure there is value to a homogeneous constituency where all of the participants, say, are from Jehovah's Witnesses. But in my own personal experience of this model, a very large part of value to me was seeing how much of what I experienced was similar to what people from very different groups experienced.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't want that to go without notice. I'm sure there's value to the other, but I think this is really significant. And even within, I recall one, I think there were 2 women, I think they were children of God, I'm not sure, but their experience had been so different from each other, or at least their recollection. They didn't agree with each other. And that's also a value.
Thank you, that's an important caveat.
Chris?
I would appreciate the form of this group that you've described, because I think so many groups that are developed, I think there's a sense that leadership has to run them. So there's a control aspect that doesn't allow the group to have the same kind of life as you clearly have been able to not just allow for, but I mean, bring to great life. I just think it's the key to this, having touched it myself, but I also want to just point out that it's group work, it's social work group work, which often doesn't get discussed in a therapy context because it's different. And it allows for just the kinds of things you're doing, to incorporate good ideas, to make it a hybrid, and also really go with where the group is going. And still be the people who are facilitating. And it's wonderful. It's really a brilliant model, so I appreciate it very much.
Thanks.
Okay, we've got 5 minutes. Is there any last questions? I think we're done.
Thank you.
Thank you.